Lottie Vasquez is a struggling waitress barely making ends meet, working long hours to afford her father's insulin and keep a roof over her head. One night at Bellini's restaurant, a simple accident changes everything. She spills water on a woman in an expensive designer dress and inadvertently overhears a confession about an illicit affair. The woman is Myla Kane, wife of Sebastian Kane, one of the city's most powerful and dangerous crime lords. Sebastian witnesses the incident from the shadows and pays Lottie handsomely for her silence. But hours later, Myla is found dead, executed in her own home. Suddenly, Lottie finds herself caught between the police, who believe she's a key witness, and Sebastian, who sees her as either a valuable asset or a dangerous liability. As Lottie is drawn deeper into Sebastian's dark world of organized crime, family rivalries, and deadly betrayals, she must navigate a dangerous game where the wrong move could cost her life. Torn between the survival instincts that kept her alive in poverty and the dangerous attraction growing between her and Sebastian, Lottie must decide. Can she trust a man whose world runs on violence and power? Let's find out. If you want to watch more captivating dark romance stories like this, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Now, let's dive into Lottie's dangerous world. The neon sign of Bellini's flickered its dying pulse at midnight, casting sickly pink shadows across the dining room. My feet throbbed in shoes held together by duct tape and prayer. 9 months of 12-hour shifts had worn them down to almost nothing. But new shoes meant choosing between my own comfort and my father's insulin, and that wasn't really a choice at all. I wiped down table 14 for the 4th time, the bleach smell mixing with lingering garlic and burnt butter until my stomach turned. Around me, the last customers lingered over dessert wine, their laughter bright and careless, the sound of people who'd never had to count pennies.
"Lottie, you're dead on your feet!"
Carlos called from behind the bar.
"Go home. I'll handle closing."
I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I needed every hour, every tip, every dollar. "Just let me finish my section," I said, forcing a smile that felt like cracking glass. That's when I saw them. Table 9, the corner booth we saved for high rollers. They'd come in 20 minutes ago while I was in the back, and Jasmine had taken them, her eyes lighting up at the prospect of a fat tip. But Jasmine was gone now, crying in the bathroom over her ex-boyfriend again, which meant table 9 was mine. I grabbed a water pitcher and headed over, my server smile already fixed in place, my mind already calculating percentages. The woman sat facing me, and she was beautiful in that effortless way that came with money and time. Designer dress, diamonds at her throat that could have paid my rent for a year. Her auburn hair fell in perfect waves, and her laugh was too loud, too bright, edged with wine and cruelty. But it was the man beside her who made my breath catch. He sat with his back partially to me, but even from this angle I could see the cut of his suit, navy blue, tailored so precisely it looked painted on. His hand rested on the table, and I noticed the watch, something that probably cost more than my car. The scent reached me first. Expensive cologne, sandalwood, and something darker mixed with her perfume, floral and cloying. I filled their water glasses with steady hands despite the exhaustion pulling at my bones. The woman didn't look at me. To people like her, servers were furniture that occasionally moved. Then I heard it, her laugh, followed by words that made my hand freeze mid-pour.
"Not like he'll notice. Too busy building his empire to care what his wife does with her time."
The man beside her chuckled, low and conspiratorial. His hand slid across the table to cover hers. I should have walked away, should have minded my own business, but I've always had terrible timing. As I turned, my elbow caught the pitcher. Everything happened in slow motion and too fast all at once. Water cascaded across the table, soaking the white tablecloth, flooding the bread basket, and horror of horrors, splashing directly onto the woman's lap. She shrieked, jumping up as water streamed down her designer dress.
"You stupid clumsy."
Her hand flew up, and I flinched, expecting the slap.
"Enough."
The word was quiet, almost soft, but it cut through her rage like a knife through silk. I turned toward the sound and found myself looking at a third person I hadn't noticed. A man seated at the far end of the booth, almost hidden in shadow. He stood now, unfolding from his seat with the kind of grace that spoke of absolute control. My heart stopped. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that made the other man's look cheap. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, but it was his eyes that pinned me in place. gray like storm clouds, assessing me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Behind him, 2 other men materialized from somewhere, both built like walls, wearing identical dark suits and expressions that promised violence. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, grabbing napkins. "I didn't mean, I'll get towels."
Who is he?
The man in charcoal asked, his voice still soft, still dangerous. I blinked. What?
Your boss. Who owns this restaurant?
Mr. Bellini, but he's not here tonight.
Do you have any idea who I am?
The woman screeched.
Myla.
The man's eyes never left mine.
Go to the car. James will take you home.
But Sebastian,
Now.
She went. The other man scrambled after her. One of the bodyguards followed, leaving me alone with this stranger whose name was apparently Sebastian and whose presence felt like standing too close to an electrical current. He pulled out his wallet, black leather, understated, and extracted several bills. Hundreds, multiple hundreds. He placed them on the wet table with the kind of care that suggested the amount meant nothing to him.
For the inconvenience.
He said. Then his eyes found mine again, holding them for a beat too long.
And for what you heard.
My mouth went dry. I didn't hear anything. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face.
You're a terrible liar.
I'm a professional server, I said, finding some kernel of courage I didn't know I possessed. I don't hear, see, or remember anything that happens at my tables.
Smart girl.
He moved past me, close enough that I caught his scent again. Sandalwood, leather, and danger.
What's your name?
Lottie. He paused at the edge of the booth.
Lottie.
He repeated like he was testing how it felt in his mouth.
Be more careful, Lottie. Accidents can be dangerous.
It wasn't a threat. Or maybe it was. I couldn't tell. He walked away, his remaining guard following 3 steps behind, and I stood there, water still dripping onto the floor, my heart hammering against my ribs, not knowing that I'd just witnessed the beginning of everything. Later, after we'd closed, after I'd mopped up the water and counted the money he'd left, $900, more than I made in 2 weeks, I walked home through streets that smelled of rain and exhaust. The money burned in my pocket. I could pay for Dad's insulin in advance, could get those shoes, could breathe for just a moment, but something about it felt wrong, felt like payment for something I didn't understand yet. I thought about the woman, Myla, about her laugh and her diamonds and her careless cruelty, about how she'd talked about her husband like he was an inconvenience. And I thought about Sebastian, about the way his eyes had catalogued me, seen me in a way that made me feel simultaneously exposed and protected. My phone buzzed as I climbed the stairs to my 3rd-floor walk-up. Unknown number.
Don't spend the money yet.
I froze, my key halfway to the lock. Another message.
Go to sleep, Lottie. Tomorrow everything changes.
I should have been terrified, should have called the police. Should have done anything except what I did, which was stare at those words until they blurred, then let myself into my tiny apartment and collapse onto my second-hand couch. Through my window, the city glittered with lights that belonged to other people, other lives. Lives where you didn't wear duct-taped shoes and count every penny and wonder if you'd ever be anything more than invisible. I fell asleep with my phone in my hand and woke to pounding on my door. The morning light was too bright, stabbing through my thin curtains. My phone said 7 a.m., maybe 4 hours of sleep. The pounding continued, urgent and demanding.
Lottie Vasquez!
A man's voice, official and cold. I stumbled to the door and peered through the peephole. 2 police officers. My stomach dropped. I opened the door with shaking hands. Yes, that's me.
We need you to come down to the station.
The taller officer said. He had gray hair and tired eyes.
There's been an incident.
What kind of incident? I haven't done anything.
We're not arresting you,
The younger officer said, kinder.
we just need to ask you some questions about last night, about an event at Bellini's.
The table, the water, Myla and her affair, and Sebastian. I need to call my dad, I said, my voice far away. He'll worry. They waited while I grabbed my phone, my keys. I texted Dad a lie about picking up an extra shift, hating myself for it, but knowing the truth would make him panic. He had enough to worry about with his diabetes without adding police stations to the list. The ride downtown happened in a blur. They put me in an interview room, not a cell, they emphasized, just a room with fluorescent lights and beige walls and a mirror that I knew was a window.
I'm Detective Hayes.
The man said, settling into the chair across from me, maybe 50, with dark hair graying at the temples and an expression that managed to be both stern and sympathetic.
You're not in trouble, Miss Vasquez. We just need to understand what you saw last night.
I didn't see anything, I said automatically.
You were working table 9, is that correct?
Yes, but only at the end of the night. Jasmine had them initially.
What time did you approach the table?
I tried to remember. Around midnight. Maybe a little after. Detective Hayes slid a photograph across the table. Myla. Same perfect hair, same diamonds. But frozen now, unaware of the camera.
Do you recognize this woman?
My mouth went dry. She was at the table. The one I spilled water on.
And did you hear her say anything? Anything at all about her personal life?
The temperature dropped. I don't listen to customers' private conversations.
Miss Vasquez, this woman was found dead this morning.
The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. What?
Her name was Myla Kane, wife of Sebastian Kane, who I'm sure you've heard of.
I hadn't. But the way Detective Hayes said the name told me everything.
She was killed in her home sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. Professional hit. Very clean.
He slid another photo across. The man who'd been sitting beside her.
Myla Kane and Adrian Russo. What did you hear?
I thought about the $900 in my purse. About the text messages. About Sebastian's eyes when he'd said accidents could be dangerous. I heard her laugh, I said carefully, and something about someone not finding out, but I was busy cleaning. I wasn't paying attention. He studied me.
Sebastian Kane runs one of the largest organized crime families in the city, has for 15 years. He's dangerous, Miss Vasquez. If he thinks you know something...
I don't know anything. My voice came out sharper than intended. I'm a waitress. I spilled water. He paid me to forget about it. That's all.
He paid you? How much?
I hesitated. $900. Detective Hayes's eyebrows rose.
That's a lot of money for spilling water.
Maybe he tips big.
Or maybe he's buying your silence.
He leaned forward.
Here's what I think happened. I think you overheard Myla Kane confessing to her affair. I think her husband was there, listening. I think he killed her because of what you heard.
That's insane.
Sebastian Kane is not a man you want noticing you. Stay away from him. If he contacts you, call me immediately. Understand?
I nodded, not trusting my voice. They drove me home, left me with a card and a warning. I locked my door and slid down to the floor, my back against the wood. Myla Kane was dead. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Check your mailbox. My blood turned to ice. I shouldn't go. Should call Detective Hayes right now. Instead, I found myself walking down the 3 flights of stairs, my heart in my throat. My mailbox held a single black envelope, heavy paper, expensive. Inside was a credit card, all black, no numbers visible, just a name embossed in silver, Lottie Vasquez, and a note, handwritten in sharp, elegant script. For your trouble, use it wisely. Someone will be in touch. No signature. I stood there holding a credit card from a man who'd just lost his wife under suspicious circumstances. A man who was apparently a crime lord. A man whose eyes I couldn't stop seeing.
Lottie?
Mrs. Rodriguez from downstairs stood in her doorway.
You okay, honey? Saw the police this morning.
I'm fine, I lied, shoving the card into my pocket. Just some questions about work. Inside my apartment, I locked the door and pulled the curtains. The card sat on my kitchen counter, gleaming black against chipped laminate. I picked up my phone and dialed the number from the note. It rang once.
Miss Vasquez.
A man's voice, smooth and professional. Not Sebastian.
I trust you received the gift.
Who are you?
My name is James. I work for Mr. Kane. He wants to meet with you.
I already met him.
He wants to meet with you properly. Tonight, 8 p.m. A car will pick you up.
I'm not going anywhere.
It's not a request, Miss Vasquez. You have something Mr. Kane needs. Information, and he's willing to compensate you generously.
I don't know anything. I told the police.
The police?
James's voice cool.
Yes, we're aware of your conversation with Detective Hayes, which is precisely why Mr. Kane needs to speak with you, to ensure we understand each other clearly.
My heart hammered. Is that a threat?
It's an invitation, one you'd be wise to accept.
The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my poverty, secondhand furniture, an empty fridge I couldn't afford to fill, bills marked with red stamps, and tried to remember how to breathe. 8 p.m., a car. A meeting with a man who ran a crime family. I looked at the black card again. The weight of it felt wrong, felt like a chain disguised as a gift. My phone rang. Dad!
Lottie, sweetheart, you sound tired.
I closed my eyes against the burn of tears. I'm okay, just a long night.
You're working too hard, baby.
With what money? With what time? With what energy? When we hung up, I looked at the clock. 11 a.m. 9 hours until the car came. 9 hours to decide what kind of person I was going to be. I spent 3 hours researching Sebastian Kane on my phone. The information was sparse, but damning. Inherited his father's empire at 26 after the old man died. Natural causes, though the quotation marks suggested otherwise. Expanded into legitimate enterprises. Real estate, restaurants, import-export. But underneath were the whispers. Racketeering, money laundering, murder for hire, witnesses who disappeared, evidence that vanished. Through it all, photos of Sebastian at charity galas, shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons, always in those impeccable suits, always with that expression of controlled power, always alone. No wife on his arm despite 15 years of marriage to Myla. No public displays of affection, just a man who ruled from the shadows. I found one article from 3 years ago, a business magazine piece. The photo showed him in his office, all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling windows. He wasn't smiling, but there was something in his eyes the camera had caught, something that looked almost like loneliness. I closed my phone before I could follow that thought further. At 6 p.m. I showered until my skin turned pink. Then I stood in front of my closet, 6 hangers of clothes, most from thrift stores, and tried to figure out what you wore to meet a crime lord. I settled on the only dress I owned that wasn't my work uniform. Black, simple, hitting just above the knees. I'd bought it 2 years ago for a job interview that never happened. It was a little loose now. I'd lost weight I couldn't afford to lose, but it was clean and professional. I left my hair down, applied minimal makeup with shaking hands. No jewelry except the small silver studs Dad had given me for my 18th birthday. In the mirror, I looked pale, scared, young, 23 but feeling 16. At 7:55 p.m., my phone buzzed. The car is outside. I looked out my window. A black SUV sat at the curb, tinted windows reflecting streetlights. This was it. The moment where I could still choose differently. I thought about Dad's insulin running out in 3 days, about the eviction notice I'd shoved in a drawer, about the way Myla had laughed, careless and cruel because money insulated her from consequences, until it didn't. I grabbed my coat and walked down the stairs before I could change my mind. The driver opened the door as I approached, maybe 40, built like he ate nails for breakfast with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow.
Miss Vasquez.
Not a question, a confirmation. I slid into the back seat. The interior smelled like leather and that same sandalwood scent I remembered from Sebastian. Where are we going? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded.
Mr. Kane's home.
Not a restaurant or an office. His home, where Myla had died just hours ago. We drove for 30 minutes, leaving my neighborhood and heading into areas I'd only seen in magazines. The buildings grew taller, more elegant. Even the sidewalks looked cleaner. Finally, we turned into a driveway guarded by a gate. The driver entered a code. The gate swung open. The house beyond wasn't a house. It was an estate. 3 stories of pale stone and dark windows lit from below by landscape lighting that made it look like something from a Gothic novel. This was where Myla had lived, had died. We parked near the front entrance. Another man in a suit waited there, older, maybe 50, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent a lifetime managing dangerous people.
Miss Vasquez.
His voice matched the one from the phone.
Thank you for coming. I'm James.
Did I have a choice? A flicker of something crossed his face.
There's always a choice, Miss Vasquez. You made yours when you kept the card.
He led me inside. I tried not to gape. The entry hall was all marble and crystal, with a staircase that curved up to the 2nd floor. Artwork hung on the walls. Real artwork.
Mr. Kane is in his study,
James said, guiding me down a hallway.
He's looking forward to speaking with you.
Looking forward, like his wife hadn't been murdered this morning. James stopped at a heavy wooden door, knocked twice, then opened it without waiting for a response. The study was exactly like the photo I'd seen online. Dark wood, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city sprawled below. A massive desk dominated one end. Behind it, Sebastian Kane stood with his back to us, hands in his pockets, staring out at the view. He wore black. Even from behind, he radiated that same controlled power.
Miss Vasquez, sir,
James announced, then withdrew, closing the door with a soft click. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he turned. Those gray eyes found mine immediately. In the soft lighting, I could see more details. The fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way his shoulders filled out his suit.
Lottie.
He said, and somehow my name sounded different in his mouth.
Thank you for coming.
You didn't give me much choice.
James can be persuasive.
He moved toward a bar cart near the windows.
Drink?
No, thank you. He poured himself something amber and took a measured sip. The silence stretched, and I realized he was waiting for me to break it. I refused to squirm. Finally, he spoke.
You spoke with Detective Hayes this morning.
Your wife was murdered.
My wife was executed.
His voice remained calm.
There's a difference. One implies passion, the other implies judgment.
The temperature dropped. Did you kill her? He took another sip.
No, I don't kill my own betrayals, Lottie. I have people for that.
I couldn't tell if he was joking. But you knew, I said, about the affair.
I've known for 6 months. Myla was never subtle.
He moved to stand behind his desk.
The affair with Adrian Russo was simply the most recent. There were others.
Then why stay married? His smile was cold.
Because marriage in my world is a business arrangement. Myla came from the Moretti family, brought connections, legitimacy. What she did with her time was her concern, as long as she remained discreet.
She wasn't discreet last night.
No.
His eyes pinned me.
She wasn't. Which brings us to you, Lottie Vasquez. 23 years old, waitress at Bellini's for 3 years, father with diabetes requiring expensive medication, rent 4 months overdue, student loans you'll never pay off.
My breath caught. How do you...
I know everything about everyone who enters my life. It's how I've survived.
He leaned forward slightly.
And you, Lottie, have entered my life at a very inconvenient moment.
I didn't ask to.
No, you spilled water, a simple accident. But accidents have consequences.
He set down his glass.
You heard my wife confess to an affair. You saw her with her lover. Hours later, she was killed. The police believe I'm responsible. They also believe you're a witness, which makes you either valuable or dangerous.
I don't know anything, I said automatically.
You know she was having an affair. You know she spoke carelessly. You know I was there, listening.
He leaned forward.
The question is, what will you do with that knowledge?
I'll forget it. Like you paid me to.
$900 isn't enough to buy permanent silence.
Then how much is? The question hung between us, sharp and dangerous. Sebastian studied me for a long moment. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. He slid it across the polished surface.
Come here.
I moved forward on legs that felt disconnected, opened the folder. Inside were documents, medical bills, Dad's bills with his name and diagnosis and crushing totals, my rent statements marked overdue, my student loan summary, and beneath all that, a single sheet of paper, a check made out to me, blank amount line. I don't understand, I whispered.
I'm offering you a choice,
Sebastian said, his voice low and compelling.
Option 1, you take that check, fill in any amount you want, and walk away. Your father's medical bills will be paid. Your debts will disappear. You'll never worry about money again. In exchange, you forget what you heard. You tell the police nothing. You disappear from this situation entirely.
It was everything I'd ever needed. Freedom from poverty, from fear, from exhaustion. What's option 2? I asked. Sebastian's eyes darkened.
Option 2 is more complicated, more dangerous.
Tell me anyway. He moved around the desk, closing the distance between us. I could smell his cologne again, sandalwood and danger. He was close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact.
Option 2,
he said softly,
is that you stay. You work for me. I need someone the police trust, someone who appears innocent, someone who can move through certain circles without attracting attention.
You want me to spy for you?
I want you to be my eyes and ears in places I can't go. In exchange, I'll give you everything option 1 offers, plus protection, safety, a place in my world.
Your world where people get executed? His hand came up, not threatening, just there. His fingers touched my chin, tilting my face up slightly.
My world where loyalty is rewarded beyond measure, where those under my protection are untouchable.
I should have pulled away, should have grabbed the check and run. Instead, I stood frozen, caught in those gray eyes. Why me? I whispered.
Because you're invisible, Lottie. People like you move through the world unnoticed. You see everything, and no one suspects you're looking. You're smart enough to survive, desperate enough to be useful, and honest enough that I believe you when you give your word.
I haven't given you my word.
Not yet.
His thumb brushed along my jaw, feather-light.
But you will.
He was right. God help me, he was right. Because standing in his study, surrounded by evidence of his power and ruthlessness, I realized something terrible. I didn't want to disappear back into my invisible life, didn't want to return to the crushing poverty, didn't want to spend the rest of my existence being overlooked. I wanted what he was offering, the danger and the protection, the money and the power. I wanted to be seen. If I agree, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What happens next? Sebastian's smile was slow, dangerous, satisfied.
Next, we make sure you survive what's coming. Because Myla's family won't rest until someone pays for her death, and Adrian Russo has powerful friends who want revenge for his disappearance.
His disappearance.
He left the restaurant with Myla last night. No one's seen him since.
He shrugged.
Adrian made his choice when he touched what belonged to me.
The casual admission should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something else, something dark and electric. So you need me to help you find out who actually killed Myla?
I need you to be exactly who you are, an innocent witness who knows nothing, while secretly helping me identify the traitor in my organization who thought they could frame me for my own wife's murder.
It was insane. Suicidal. I thought about Detective Hayes' warning, about Dad's medication, about the black card in my purse and the check on the desk, about the way Sebastian was looking at me like I was a puzzle he wanted to solve. I'll need guarantees, I heard myself say. Protection, written agreements about my father's care.
Done.
And I can walk away whenever I want. His eyes darkened.
We both know that's not true, Lottie. Once you're in my world, walking away becomes complicated.
Then I need to know you'll keep me safe. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body.
I will protect what's mine, and if you agree to this, you become mine to protect.
The possessiveness in his voice should have sent me running. Instead, it sent a shiver down my spine. Okay, I whispered. Okay, I'll do it. For the first time since I'd met him, Sebastian smiled. Really smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost human.
Then welcome to the family, Lottie.
He extended his hand.
Try not to get killed.
I took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, commanding, and with that handshake, I sealed my fate. Sebastian kept my hand in his for a beat longer than necessary, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. Then he released me and moved back to his desk. All business again.
James!
He called, not raising his voice. The door opened immediately. Had he been standing there the entire time?
Miss Vasquez has agreed to assist us,
Sebastian said, his tone crisp.
Prepare the West Wing guest suite. She'll be staying here for the time being.
Wait, what? I turned to face him. I never agreed to move in.
Your apartment is being watched by the police, probably the Moretti family, Myla's relatives, and possibly whoever actually killed my wife.
Sebastian's expression remained impassive.
You'll be safer here, where I can control who has access to you.
I have to work. I have responsibilities.
You quit your job an hour ago. James called Bellini's on your behalf. Personal emergency, family illness. They understood.
Anger flared hot in my chest. You had no right.
I had every right the moment you shook my hand.
His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath.
This isn't a game, Lottie. People are going to come looking for you, asking questions, applying pressure. If you're going to survive this, you need to be where I can protect you.
Control me, you mean?
If that's what it takes.
He picked up his whiskey glass.
You're free to leave, of course. Take the check, walk out that door. But the moment you do, you're on your own. And I promise you, the Morettis are far less patient than I am.
He was right. I hated that he was right. My father, I said quietly, he'll worry.
James will arrange for his care. Round-the-clock nursing, the best doctors, a comfortable facility with everything he needs.
Sebastian's eyes met mine.
He'll be told you've taken a private nursing position that requires you to live on site. It's not far from the truth.
And what am I exactly? Your nurse? Something dangerous flickered in his expression.
You're under my protection. What that means depends entirely on how useful you prove to be.
James cleared his throat softly.
Sir, Detective Hayes is requesting another meeting with Miss Vasquez tomorrow morning. He's been quite persistent.
Good.
Sebastian set down his glass.
Tell him Miss Vasquez is happy to cooperate. Schedule it for 10 a.m. at the precinct. I want her wired.
My blood ran cold. Wired? You want me to record the police?
I want to know what they know, what they suspect, what leverage they think they have.
He moved toward me again.
You're going to tell Detective Hayes exactly what he wants to hear, that you're a frightened witness who saw nothing, knows nothing, just wants to go back to her normal life. You'll be convincing because it's mostly true.
And the wire is insurance, I said. So you know I'm not actually working with them against you. The implications stung.
I don't trust anyone, Lottie. It's why I'm still alive.
His hand came up to my face, cupping my cheek with surprising gentleness.
But I want to trust you. Show me I can.
The touch sent heat through my body, unwanted and undeniable. I pulled back, needing distance. What happens after the meeting?
James will bring you back here. We'll review what the detective said. identify any threats, plan our next move.
His hand dropped.
In the meantime, you'll stay in the West Wing. It's comfortable, private. You'll have everything you need.
Except freedom. His smile was sharp.
Freedom is overrated. Safety, on the other hand, is priceless.
James led me through the mansion, up the curved staircase, down a long hallway lined with artwork and antiques. The West Wing was separate from the main house, connected by a glass walkway overlooking gardens below.
Mr. Kane values his privacy,
James explained.
The West Wing is used for trusted guests. You'll have your own suite, bathroom, small sitting room. Meals can be delivered, or you're welcome to use the main kitchen.
Am I allowed to leave? James's expression remained neutral.
You're not a prisoner, Miss Vasquez, but I would advise against wandering the grounds alone, especially at night. Security can be overzealous with strangers.
Translation: leave without permission and get shot. The suite was bigger than my entire apartment. Cream walls, plush carpeting, a 4-poster bed that looked like something from a movie. French doors led to a private balcony overlooking the city.
Your belongings are being collected from your apartment as we speak,
James said.
They'll arrive within the hour. If you need anything else, there's an intercom by the bed. Press 2 and you'll reach the main house.
He left me alone, closing the door with a soft click. I stood in the middle of the room, my heart racing. What had I done? 24 hours ago, I was a waitress worrying about rent. Now I was living in a crime lord's mansion, preparing to wear a wire to a police interview, tangled in a murder I didn't commit but couldn't escape. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Sleep well, Lottie. Tomorrow changes everything. Sebastian, the man who now controlled my life. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I set it carefully on the nightstand and walked to the French doors. The city spread below like a carpet of lights, beautiful and cold, full of people living ordinary lives, people who didn't know the darkness that moved beneath the surface. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and tried not to think about how easy it had been to say yes, how little resistance I'd put up, how part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, had been waiting for someone like him to see me, to value me, to make me matter, even if mattering meant becoming complicit in things I'd spent my life trying to avoid. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I opened the door to find a young woman holding several shopping bags, designer labels visible even from a distance.
Mr. Kane thought you might need some things,
she said shyly, Italian accent, maybe early 20s.
Clothes, toiletries. He had me guess your size.
Thank you, but I...
Please.
She pressed the bags into my hands.
He'll be angry if you refuse. And trust me, you don't want that.
She disappeared before I could respond. I set the bags on the bed and opened them one by one. Designer clothes, all in my size. How had he known? Including underwear that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Expensive skincare products, makeup, perfume. Everything carefully chosen, perfectly coordinated. Everything designed to transform me from invisible waitress into something else. Someone else. Someone who belonged in his world. I should have been furious at the presumption. Instead, I found myself holding up a black dress, silk, judging by the weight, and wondering what I'd look like wearing it. Wondering what Sebastian would think when he saw me in it. I shoved the thought away and focused on unpacking. My own clothes arrived an hour later, looking shabby and worn next to the designer pieces. I hung them in the massive closet anyway, needing something familiar, something that remembered who I used to be. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay in the enormous bed, surrounded by luxury I'd never imagined, and thought about Dad. Was he okay? Did he believe the story about the nursing position? Would he be safe? Would any of us be safe when this was over? Sometime after midnight, I heard voices outside. I crept to the French doors and peered out. Below in the gardens, Sebastian stood with 3 men I didn't recognize. The conversation looked intense, hands gesturing sharply, bodies tense. One of the men pulled out his phone, showed Sebastian something. Even from this distance, I could see Sebastian's expression darken. He looked up suddenly, his gaze finding my window with unerring accuracy. Even in the darkness, even at this distance, I felt the weight of his attention. He said something to the men, then walked toward the house, disappearing from view. My heart hammered as I scrambled back to bed, pulling the covers up like a child hiding from monsters. But the monster didn't come. The mansion remained silent. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me under. I woke to sunrise painting the room gold and James knocking on my door.
Miss Vasquez, breakfast in 30 minutes. Then we prepare for your meeting with Detective Hayes.
The wire was smaller than I expected, a tiny microphone that attached beneath my bra strap, nearly invisible under clothing, a recording device the size of a credit card tucked into the lining of my purse.
The detective will likely sweep you for recording devices,
James explained.
These are high-grade, nearly undetectable, but if he finds them, we have plausible deniability. You can claim you were recording for your own protection.
And if he doesn't believe me?
Then you'll have bigger problems than a wire.
James's expression remained neutral.
Mr. Kane will be listening in real time. If things go wrong, if you're in danger, say the word insulin, and we'll extract you immediately.
Extract me from a police station?
Mr. Kane has resources you can't imagine, Miss Vasquez. Trust that he'll protect his investments.
His investments. Not his allies, not his friends, his property. The ride to the precinct happened in tense silence. I wore one of the designer outfits. Dark jeans, a cream blouse, a leather jacket that probably cost more than my car. I looked put together, professional, like someone who had their life under control, like someone who wasn't about to lie to the police while wearing a wire for a crime boss. Detective Hayes met me in the same interview room as yesterday. He looked more tired, if that was possible. Dark circles under his eyes, coffee stains on his shirt.
Thank you for coming in, Miss Vasquez.
He gestured to the chair across from him.
I know this must be difficult.
I just want to help however I can. My voice came out steady, convincing. Myla seemed like a nice woman. What happened to her is terrible. He studied me for a long moment.
You're wearing different clothes today. Nice ones.
My heart skipped. Yes. A friend loaned them to me. My work uniform was dirty.
Friends in high places?
Just friends who are more successful than I am. I forced a small laugh. Not hard to do when you're a waitress. He didn't smile.
Where were you last night, Miss Vasquez?
Home. I was exhausted after everything yesterday. Why?
Because Adrian Russo's body was found this morning, dumped in the river, execution style, single bullet to the back of the head.
His eyes never left my face.
You were the last person to see him and Myla Kane alive, besides whoever killed them.
The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. I don't know anything about that.
You're in danger, Miss Vasquez. You witnessed something that got 2 people killed. Whoever did this might think you know more than you do. They might decide you're a liability.
Then what am I supposed to do? My voice cracked, genuine fear bleeding through. Hide, run, I can barely afford rent.
I can offer you protection, witness protection if necessary, but you have to be completely honest with me.
He leaned forward.
Did Sebastian Kane contact you after you left here yesterday?
Remember your training, James had said. Tell the truth whenever possible. It makes the lies more believable. Yes, I admitted. He sent someone to pick me up. Wanted to make sure I understood that I shouldn't talk about what I heard at the restaurant.
Did he threaten you?
Not exactly. More like, offered me money to keep quiet. Not a lie. He gave me a credit card. Said to use it wisely. Detective Hayes's jaw tightened.
Do you still have it?
I pulled the black card from my purse, slid it across the table. I didn't use it. Didn't feel right taking money from him after everything. Also, not a lie. I hadn't used it yet. He examined the card, photographed it, then returned it.
Miss Vasquez, Sebastian Kane is not your friend. He's a killer, a criminal, a man who destroys lives without hesitation. If he's showing interest in you, it's because he wants something. And when he's done with you, you'll disappear just like everyone else who's gotten too close.
I know that. I met his eyes. Let him see my fear. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm telling you everything. I just want to go back to my normal life.
I'm not sure that's possible anymore.
His voice softened slightly.
But I'll do everything I can to keep you safe. Just promise me you'll be careful. And if Kane contacts you again, you call me immediately. Understand?
I understand. He gave me his card again, reminded me to be careful again, and sent me back out into the world carrying secrets that could get me killed. James was waiting in the car, his expression carefully neutral as I slid into the back seat.
Well done, Miss Vasquez,
he said as we pulled away.
Mr. Kane will be pleased.
Adrian Russo is dead, I said numbly. Shot in the head and dumped in the river.
Yes, unfortunate, but necessary.
Necessary? I turned to stare at him. He was murdered.
He betrayed Mr. Kane, slept with his wife, helped arrange whatever plan got her killed.
James's voice remained calm, matter of fact.
In our world, such betrayals have only one consequence.
And Myla? Was her death necessary too?
Myla's death was a message. Someone wanted to frame Mr. Kane, to start a war between families. They used his wife to do it.
He glanced at me in the rearview mirror.
Which means you, Miss Vasquez, are now bait. Whoever killed Myla will come for you next, to tie up loose ends. And when they do, we'll be ready.
The words hung in the air like poison. I was bait. A lure to draw out a killer. Sebastian had known this from the start, had planned it, and I'd agreed because I was desperate and stupid and dazzled by his power. I want out, I whispered.
It's too late for that.
James's expression remained neutral.
You're in the game now, Miss Vasquez. Best thing you can do is learn the rules and try to survive.
We drove back to the mansion in silence. My hands shook in my lap. The wire beneath my clothes felt like it was burning into my skin. Sebastian was waiting in his study when James brought me in. He stood by the windows again, hands in his pockets, the sun backlighting him.
You did well,
he said without turning around.
The detective suspects nothing.
Adrian Russo is dead.
Yes.
Did you kill him? He turned then, his expression unreadable.
Does it matter?
Yes, it matters. I moved further into the room, anger overriding fear. You used me, made me bait without telling me, put me in danger without warning me.
I told you this would be dangerous.
His voice remained calm.
I told you people were going to come looking for you. Did you think I meant for tea and conversation?
You could have been honest.
Honest?
He laughed, sharp and bitter.
There's no honesty in my world, Lottie. There's only survival. And right now, you're surviving because you're useful to me. Don't forget that.
The words hit like a slap. I'd known, of course. Had known from the start that I was just a tool, a pawn. But hearing him say it so bluntly still hurt. Then let me go, I said quietly. Let me take the money and disappear. You don't need me.
I do need you.
He crossed the distance between us in 3 strides, his hands gripping my shoulders.
Because whoever killed Myla is still out there, still planning, and they're going to come for you, Lottie. Whether you're here or in your apartment or on the other side of the country, at least here, I can keep you alive.
Why do you even care? I'm just...
You're mine.
The possessiveness in his voice was undeniable.
I claimed you the moment I paid you in that restaurant. I protected you when I could have silenced you, and I'll be damned if I let some traitor take what belongs to me.
His hands softened on my shoulders, his thumbs brushing against my collarbone. The touch sent electricity through me, wanted and terrifying in equal measure. I'm not a possession, I whispered.
In my world, everything is a possession. Power, money, loyalty, lives.
His eyes held mine, dark and consuming.
The question is, are you strong enough to be mine, or will you break like everyone else?
I should have said no, should have walked away, consequences be damned. Instead, I lifted my chin and met his gaze. I won't break. His smile was slow, dangerous, approving.
Good, because tomorrow we're going to a funeral, Myla's funeral, and you're going to help me identify the traitor who thinks they can destroy me.
A funeral? Are you insane?
Probably.
He released me, stepped back.
But I'm also right. Killers always come to their victims' funerals. They can't resist, and when they see you there, alive and under my protection, they'll make a mistake.
And if I die in the crossfire?
Then I'll make sure they die slower.
His expression was deadly serious.
But that won't happen, Lottie, because I protect what's mine, always.
The funeral was held at St. Catherine's Cathedral, a Gothic monster of stone and stained glass that had stood for over a century. Rain fell in sheets, turning the steps slick, the mourners' black umbrellas into a sea of darkness. I stood beside Sebastian, wearing a black dress he'd provided, appropriate, expensive, covering. His hand rested on the small of my back, possessive and protective. To anyone watching, we looked like a couple, a united front. The reality was far more complicated.
The Moretti family is here,
James murmured from Sebastian's other side.
Myla's father, 3 brothers, extended family. They're watching you.
I could feel their eyes like lasers, hostile, assessing, wondering who I was and why Sebastian Kane had brought a stranger to his wife's funeral.
Let them watch,
Sebastian said quietly, his hand pressing more firmly against my back.
Stay close to me. Don't speak to anyone, unless I tell you to.
Inside, the cathedral was packed. Hundreds of people, all dressed in black, all wearing carefully neutral expressions. This wasn't grief, this was politics. A showing of power, of alliances, of who stood where in the complex hierarchy of organized crime. Myla's casket sat at the front, draped in white roses. Her photo, beautiful, smiling, alive, stood beside it on an easel. I thought about her laugh at the restaurant, her careless cruelty, her diamonds and her affair, and her complete certainty that consequences were for other people. She'd been wrong. We sat near the front in a pew that had clearly been reserved for Sebastian. More eyes followed us. More whispers rippled through the crowd. The service was in Italian, which I didn't understand, but I watched the faces around us, cataloging reactions like James had taught me. Who cried, who didn't, who kept glancing at Sebastian with calculation in their eyes. An older man sat across the aisle, Myla's father, I assumed. Silver hair, strong features hardened by decades of violence. He stared at Sebastian with undisguised hatred.
Antonio Moretti.
Sebastian murmured, following my gaze.
Myla's father, he blames me for her death.
After the service, we moved to the cemetery. The rain had softened to a drizzle, and the crowd gathered around the gravesite like ravens. That's when I saw him, a man standing apart from the main group. Younger than most, maybe 35. Dark suit, unremarkable face. But there was something about the way he watched the proceedings. Too focused, too intent. I touched Sebastian's arm, subtle. 10 o'clock. Dark hair, standing alone. His eyes flicked that direction, barely a glance.
Thomas Bellamy works for the Costello family. What about him?
He's not watching the casket. He's watching the crowd like he's looking for someone. Sebastian's expression didn't change, but I felt his body tense beside me.
James, confirm Thomas Bellamy's presence and find out what business he has here.
James melted into the crowd without a word. The burial concluded with the priest's final blessing. As people began to disperse, Antonio Moretti approached, his sons flanking him, 3 large men with their father's cold eyes.
Sebastian.
Antonio's voice was rough, accented.
You have the nerve to come here, to bring your...
He looked at me with contempt.
To my daughter's funeral.
I flinched, but Sebastian's hand tightened on my back, keeping me still.
Antonio, my condolences on your loss.
Sebastian's tone was respectful but firm.
Myla was my wife. I had every right to be here.
Your wife.
Antonio spat the words.
You neglected her, humiliated her, drove her into another man's arms, and then you killed her for it.
I didn't kill Myla. Someone wanted me to believe I should have. Someone wanted to start a war between our families.
Sebastian's eyes hardened.
The question is, who benefits from that war?
You speak in riddles, while my daughter lies in the ground.
Your daughter was having an affair with Adrian Russo.
Sebastian interrupted, his voice cutting.
Did you know? Did you approve? Because Adrian had connections to the Costello family, and the Costellos would love to see our families destroy each other.
Antonio's face reddened.
You dare accuse...
I accuse no one, yet.
Sebastian's gaze swept the crowd.
But I will find who killed Myla, and when I do, there won't be a hole deep enough for them to hide.
James reappeared at Sebastian's elbow.
Sir, we need to leave, now.
The urgency in his voice sent adrenaline spiking through me. Sebastian must have heard it too, because he nodded once, then guided me away from Antonio and his sons. What's wrong? I whispered as we walked quickly toward the waiting car.
Thomas Bellamy left 5 minutes ago. Made a phone call first.
James opened the door, practically shoving me inside.
We think he was reporting your presence here.
The car door slammed. Sebastian slid in beside me, James in front with the driver. We pulled away from the cemetery with controlled speed, fast enough to escape, slow enough not to attract attention. Reporting to who? I asked, my heart hammering.
That's what we need to find out.
Sebastian pulled out his phone, made a call.
Sergio, I need surveillance on Thomas Bellamy. Everything. Phone records, bank accounts, who he's meeting with. I want to know what he had for breakfast.
He paused, listening.
Yes, now.
He ended the call and turned to me. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes had softened.
Are you all right?
Someone just called me a whore at a funeral, and apparently there are people watching me who want me dead. So not really, no. A ghost of a smile crossed his face.
Antonio is old-fashioned. In his world, any woman with a powerful man is either property or...
He paused.
Don't take it personally.
Hard not to when he said it to my face.
He's grieving and scared. He knows I didn't kill Myla, which means someone else did. Someone with the power to execute his daughter and frame me for it.
Sebastian's hand found mine, his fingers lacing through mine with surprising gentleness.
That terrifies him, because if they can kill Myla, they can kill anyone.
The words hung heavy in the air. We drove in silence back to the mansion. Security had been doubled. I counted at least 6 guards at the gate, more patrolling the grounds. Whatever was happening, Sebastian was preparing for war. Inside, he led me to his study. James disappeared to coordinate whatever surveillance operation they were running on Thomas Bellamy.
Drink?
Sebastian asked, moving to the bar cart. Yes, please. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed me one. I took a sip and coughed. It burned going down, but the warmth was welcome.
You did well today,
he said, settling into the leather chair behind his desk.
Staying calm, observing, pointing out Bellamy. I just saw someone acting suspicious. That's more than most people notice. You have good instincts, Lottie.
He studied me over the rim of his glass.
Better than I expected.
Should I be flattered or insulted?
Both.
His smile was genuine this time, reaching his eyes.
You're full of surprises, Miss Vasquez. I'm beginning to think I underestimated you.
The compliment warmed me more than the whiskey. I shouldn't care what he thought. Shouldn't want his approval, but I did. What happens now? I asked.
Now we wait. See what the surveillance on Bellamy reveals. See who else makes a move.
He set down his glass.
And you stay close to me. No leaving the grounds without escorts. No phone calls except to your father. And those I'll monitor.
You don't trust me.
I'm starting to. But trust in my world is earned slowly and lost instantly.
His eyes held mine.
You've proven you can observe, can think strategically, but I need to know you won't break when things get worse.
Worse than people wanting to kill me?
Much worse.
He stood, moved around the desk.
The Morettis are planning revenge. The Costello family is making moves. And whoever killed Myla is still out there, waiting for the right moment to finish what they started.
He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact.
I need to know you'll stand with me, Lottie, that when the shooting starts, you won't run.
And if I do run?
Then you'll die alone instead of protected.
His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing along my cheekbone.
But I don't think you're a runner. I think you're a survivor. And survivors know when to hold their ground.
The touch sent electricity through me, wrong and right and terrifying all at once. Why do you care? I whispered. I'm just bait, just a tool you're using.
You were.
His other hand came up, framing my face.
But you're becoming something else, something I didn't plan for.
What? He leaned down, his forehead almost touching mine.
Something I want to keep.
Then his mouth was on mine, hot and demanding and stealing whatever breath I had left. I should have pulled away, should have maintained professional distance. Instead, I kissed him back, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. His hands slid into my hair, tilting my head for better access. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, desperate, like he'd been holding back for days and finally let go. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were nearly black with desire. This is a terrible idea, I managed.
Probably the worst I've ever had.
His thumb traced my swollen lips.
But I've never been good at denying myself what I want.
And you want me?
More than I should. More than is safe.
He stepped back, creating distance, his jaw tight.
Which is why this can't happen again. Not until this is over. Not until I know you're safe.
The rejection stung, even though I understood it. So what? We just pretend that didn't happen?
We acknowledge it happened, and we wait.
His expression was tortured.
Because if I take you to my bed now, while you're under my protection, while you're vulnerable and scared, I'm no better than the monsters I fight.
The words hit me like cold water. He was right. Of course he was right. But it didn't make the ache in my chest any less real. A sharp knock interrupted the moment. James entered, his expression grim.
Sir, we have a problem. Thomas Bellamy just met with someone you need to see.
Sebastian's entire demeanor shifted. All business again.
Show me.
James pulled out a tablet, brought up surveillance footage. A parking garage time-stamped 30 minutes ago. Thomas Bellamy stood talking to another man, their body language tense. The camera angle shifted, showing the second man's face. I gasped. It was Detective Hayes.
Your police detective is working with the Costello family,
James said flatly.
Has been for months, according to our sources. He's the one who convinced Myla to be more public with her affair, knowing it would force your hand.
The room spun. Detective Hayes. The man who'd warned me about Sebastian, who'd offered protection, who I'd worn a wire for. He was the traitor. He set everything up, I whispered. The meeting at the restaurant where I'd see them. The investigation pointing at you. All of it.
And he probably gave the kill order on Myla when the affair didn't provoke the response he wanted.
Sebastian's voice was ice.
He needed a war, needed the families fighting each other so the Costellos could move in and take over.
But why target me?
Because you're the witness, the innocent bystander who saw too much.
Sebastian's eyes met mine.
He kept you close to monitor what you knew, and when he realized I was protecting you, he had to decide, use you to get to me, or eliminate you as a liability.
My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Miss Vasquez, this is Detective Hayes. We need to talk privately. Tonight. I have information about Sebastian Kane that could save your life. Sebastian read over my shoulder, his expression darkening.
He's making his move,
he said.
Trying to separate you from my protection.
What do I do?
You agree to meet him.
Sebastian's smile was cold.
And we end this.
3 hours later, I stood in the parking lot of an abandoned warehouse on the waterfront, the location Detective Hayes had chosen. Isolated, dark, perfect for whatever he had planned. I wasn't alone, though he didn't know that. James and 6 other guards were positioned around the perimeter. Sebastian himself waited in a car 50 yards away, watching through surveillance equipment. And I wore a wire, this time for real. Detective Hayes appeared from the shadows, looking tired and desperate.
Miss Vasquez, thank you for coming.
You said you had information.
I do.
He glanced around nervously.
Sebastian Kane is planning to kill you tonight. I have proof.
You're lying. I kept my voice steady. You're the one who set everything up. The affair, Myla's murder, all of it. His expression shifted. The tiredness vanished, replaced by cold calculation.
So he told you?
He didn't have to. I figured it out myself. I took a step back. You wanted a war between the families. Used Myla. Used me. Killed anyone who got in your way.
Smart girl.
He pulled out a gun, casual and terrifying.
Smarter than I gave you credit for. Unfortunately, that makes you even more dangerous.
You're going to kill me here? Now?
I'm going to make it look like Kane did it. One more victim. One more reason for the Morettis to declare war.
He raised the gun.
Nothing personal, Miss Vasquez. Just business.
Like Myla?
She was always going to die. Too stupid, too indiscreet, but her death served a purpose.
His finger moved to the trigger.
As will yours.
The shot rang out before he could fire. Detective Hayes staggered, looking down at the red bloom spreading across his chest. He fell to his knees, the gun clattering from his hand. Sebastian stepped from the shadows, his own weapon lowered. Behind him, James and the guards materialized like ghosts.
You made a mistake, Detective,
Sebastian said, approaching the dying man.
You touched what was mine.
Hayes coughed blood.
The Costellos will come for you.
Let them.
Sebastian crouched beside him.
I'll send them to join you.
He fired again. Hayes collapsed, dead before he hit the ground. Then Sebastian was turning to me, pulling me against his chest, his hands running over my body, checking for injuries.
Are you hurt? Did he touch you?
I'm fine, my voice shook. You killed him.
He was going to kill you.
His arms tightened.
No one touches what's mine. No one.
I should have been horrified, should have been running. Instead, I buried my face in his chest and let him hold me while James and the others dealt with the body. 1 week later, I stood in Sebastian's study, watching the sunset over the city. The Costello family had backed down after Hayes's death. Apparently losing their inside man at the police department had changed their calculations. The Morettis had accepted evidence that Sebastian hadn't killed Myla, though the peace was fragile, and I was still here.
You could leave now,
Sebastian said from behind me.
The threat is over. Your father is comfortable. Your debt's paid. You're free.
I turned to face him. What if I don't want to be free? His eyes darkened.
Lottie.
You said I was becoming something you wanted to keep. Did you mean it?
Every word.
He closed the distance between us.
But this life, my world, it's dangerous. It will always be dangerous.
I know. I reached up, touched his face. But I survived. I stood my ground. And I'm not running. His smile was slow, devastating.
Then stay. Be mine. For real this time.
On one condition.
Name it.
No more lies. No more using me as bait without telling me. We're partners or nothing. He pulled me close, his mouth finding mine in a kiss that promised dark things and dangerous futures.
Partners.
He agreed.
In everything.
And as the sun set over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow, I realized I'd found what I'd been searching for all along. Not safety, not freedom, but someone who saw me, valued me, made me matter. Even if mattering meant becoming complicit in a world I'd once feared. I was no longer invisible, and I'd never be invisible again. What do you think of Lottie and Sebastian's story? Would you like to share any story ideas? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing your thoughts. Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us bring you more stories like this. And if you haven't already, Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next captivating story. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the most rewarding one. Until next time, stay captivated.